Hi, everybody. Golden Era Bookworm here, and today I have the pleasure of having again Alex Leonidas back from Alpha Destiny. It's good to have you back, bro. It really is.
Carlos, it's always a pleasure to be on.
Thanks, man. Thank you for making the time and for the patience you will offer me for answering all these questions.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. I know it's going to be a lengthy talk, but I hope it's informative for the viewers.
Yeah,
And at the end of the day, we're here to share knowledge.
absolutely. So, on that today, I basically want to ask you about how you built your physique. Basically, what your earliest programs were like, and your eventual introduction to the revelation of the conjugate system, as you described so well. How in some of your videos, how you're just like blown away by Louis Simmons's work, and
Right.
then your progression to training nowadays. So it's going to be a really cool discussion, I hope.
Yeah, especially since I've been training for a good 13 years now. So I've basically tried every method you can think of,
Ah,
many different periodization strategies, programs, exercises. I always consider myself to be the jack of all trades. And the story goes back to when I was very young. So, I mean, there's a lot to cover here.
yeah.
But I guess I can start by saying that I began with calisthenics when I was a teenager. I had just hit puberty, and I did that for a good 3 to 4 years
All right.
because my father told me not to lift weights, and that would be better to build a base with body weight training, and that if I eventually want to transition into martial arts, I could use that as well. And at the same time, there was a lot of inspiration from the anime world. Being a big Dragon Ball Z fan myself, I've talked about this in the last episode, but seeing Goku, you know, do these crazy things in the gravity chamber, then Vegeta falling up, then all the characters getting stronger. I'm young, I'm seeing this, I'm impressionable.
Yeah.
It made me want to do hardcore calisthenics. And at the time, there actually was a community on YouTube, mostly the New York scene, of guys giving advice. So, although much was primitive, there was still more room for improvement. I listened to these people and I built my foundation with push ups, pull ups, and dips.
Nice.
Basically, those three exercises with variations thereof, circuit training style. It was actually full body, but not really in the sense that I was skipping legs. Like I was doing pistol squats and cardio, but I would say that my upper body transformed the most with that. And I was always a skinny kid. I was always ripped. I always had a six pack from day one. Being, I've never not had a six pack, including when I've been bare mode 200 pounds. There's not been a time in my life where I didn't have abs. So that
Yeah.
was my starting point. Skinny to the bones, very small appetite, just being blown away by the wind. And I was 120 pounds at 5'5". After doing calisthenics exclusively, I got up to 143 pounds.
Hmm.
Now, I could have taken that even further when I look back. To be honest, I probably could have been up to 170 and beyond. With what I know now about gymnastic rings
Yeah.
and periodization, there was no reason why I had to stop. But at the time, I felt like my gains had plateaued from bodyweight training. And so now I must have been, mid teens. That's when I would transition into weight training.
All right.
And after doing so for about 8 months, I became an intermediate lifter. And that's because my work capacity was so high from the calisthenics that every workout I was adding significant amounts of weight to the big compound movements. Like it was linear, no troubles whatsoever in my first year. And I ended up going from 143 to 167. And I still had abs. So a lot of newbie gains there. And
Yeah.
then, shortly afterwards, in 2013, I'm still a teenager now. I decided to create the Alpha Destiny YouTube channel. That was in November. And I mean, it's been 10 years since. So people have seen my whole life. Everything's been documented, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, you're right in that. I mean, I've seen your oldest video was where you're like, I don't know how
A
old you are,
kid.
a real kid, 13 years ago. And so you start off with calisthenics, and you said you did that for about 3 years. Is that right?
3 to 4. I don't know. I don't remember the exact time frame, but I know it was a minimum of three.
What kind of I don't know, reps were you doing for pull-ups, chins, etc., push-ups? What was your program like?
Well, look, it was very inspired by Hannibal for King. He had this around the world routine. So it was push-ups, dips, and pull-ups. And you would just do a bunch of sets of that nonstop. And then if you want to throw in some pistol squats right after, you go for it.
Okay.
So those three, everything giant setted, and then you do variations. And it's high reps done to muscular failure.
Okay.
Very simple training. There wasn't really much programming behind. In fact, there was none.
Yeah.
It was just work hard. You see what your idols are doing, replicate it, and your reps would increase over time. Like I was able to do around 140 push-ups in a row. And the day one that I started lifting, I was hitting 15 muscle ups. Now, of course, yeah, but I'm shorter and light, you know, only 143 pounds. It's not that impressive. It's a lot harder to do that when you're a big lifter.
Yeah.
But high reps, usually in the 20 to 50 rep range.
Yeah.
That was pretty common. Pull-ups, 20, 30 reps.
Very cool. It's interesting you started off like that because Arnold also started off doing calisthenics when he was a young teenager before he got into weight training. So interesting that you also did that.
Well, there's a lot of greats who did that because they were, Marvin Eater with his famous park story.
Yeah.
That's not where he would pay kids to do dips and pull-ups. And it's funny you mention that because I had a training partner, you could say. We were three guys. We called ourselves the three assassinos. You know, we're from a generation where the game Assassin's Creed was popular, right? And we would climb buildings and do parkour. So that was also included in the calisthenics. So getting stronger fueled that. Yeah. And we would do these circuit workouts together. So that kind of kept a pace going on. And for added resistance, I mean, we would use each other to manually resist. And when doing the plank, for example, kick each other in the stomach. When you're doing leg raises, punch in the stomach. So it was always like a little bit of a macho. I mean, it's stupid. You're young, but we did have that. And then we would do morning jogs. I think it was 7 in the morning.
Nice.
And sometimes we'd even do it before school when it was during the year. But summertime, it was every day, cardio in the morning.
Very
cool. Calisthenics was every day, by the way.
Every day. Yeah. Not surprising.
Mostly every day. If we needed the rest, but it wasn't necessary for the most part.
Awesome. Now you mentioned that you transitioned into weight training and made very rapid gains. I'm not surprised. Really built not just a foundation in muscle, but in joint strength, range of motion, etc. Work capacity. Was it a normal double progression system? And was it basically your novice program that you still have online?
It wasn't my novice program because I designed that in 2015.
Okay.
But it was only double progression, literally. It was such a simple. So you're benching 135 on Monday. Let's say you do it again on Friday. You're going to try 140. And it was literally just add 2.5 pounds per session when you hit the upper end of the range you were trying to hit.
Yeah.
So back then, 6 to 10 was popular, 8 to 12, but you would only increase weight after getting 10, 10, 10 or 12, 12, 12. So basic, like you don't even have to think about it. And it was based around fundamental movement patterns. And I still train that way to this day. So one horizontal pressing pattern, one vertical press, and then the same for the pulling. So a row and a pull-up.
Yeah.
And then you would do one isolation for biceps and triceps, full body training, only squats and deadlifts for legs. Actually, that's not true. I did leg presses at the time, but it was full body training every other day.
Yeah.
Leroy Colbert style. And also a little bit before that, I had experimented with push-pull legs for a couple of months indefinitely. But the full bodies where I really acquired most of my novice gains. So that was always the foundation. And there was also programs like Strongless 5x5, Starting Strength. A lot of them had that similar format.
Yeah.
So I kind of tweaked all that to make it my own. And you'll notice with the novice program, there's a lot of similarities.
Yeah, there is.
So I can't say that I'm the sole inventor, quote unquote, because I'm not. It's just things that I borrowed and then implemented with my own training experiences. But that's all it was. 5 pounds of workout. And what was essential, in my opinion, was gaining weight. because I gained over 20 pounds. I mean, people don't want to do that nowadays. They want to maintain shredded abs year round. And I was certainly close to being shredded at the start, but I had to put on, you know, I don't know how much body fat there was, but if I were to equate it to that 143 body, I mean, I'd probably still be in the high 150s or something. So much of it was fat gain, but it didn't matter because once you gain the weight, the proper way, it distributes through a larger surface area, which is your bigger muscles. So you just end up looking better. Yeah. So also I would say, sorry?
I was going to say, it also provides more leverage.
Yes, and especially for exercises like the bench press and the squat. And those are my two exercises that went up the most. The deadlift actually did not hit after 8 months of training. It took actually a bit over a year for that one.
Okay.
Because I was structurally not built for it. So I noticed that I had very much a presser's build. So, and that's why I pride myself in being able to deadlift 600 pounds because it's structurally my worst lift. And I think that's a pretty respectable number. So when I give programming advice, it's in the context of someone who is bent forward like a Pendlay row and will often experience lower back overuse. And these are things I discovered from the start. And obviously the calisthenics provided that work capacity, being able to, like I never had trouble gassing out, even on squats. The fitness was insane. And that was from doing, 10 plus sets a workout in a circuit style fashion for years at the park. That's what it was. Literally a children's playground. It wasn't a calisthenics park. It's where kids would be on the monkey bars and you go on top of them and you do your dips and whatever. So that's what it was. So awesome. Not much to say other than the fact that double progression with gaining weight and then having the calisthenics foundation, that solidified the progress. The plateaus only happened after that point. And that's when I started learning more about periodization. Without that, I was never going to end up where I am today. Hard work can only take you so far.
Absolutely. Well, did you ever switch to that novice program that you have on your website? Or is that something that you just came up with later? Did you ever practice it?
I never ran my novice program.
You never ran?
I can't. Okay. The whole thing is, it's a novice program. Once you're past that stage, you can't ever go back.
Okay.
Fair enough. If you do that as an intermediate or advanced lifter, you're going to get injured.
Yeah.
If I ran my own novice program right now, after maybe 3 months, I would start having shoulder, elbow, and knee pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guaranteed.
Absolutely.
So but I knew, well, first of all, at the time, I didn't know it was going to end up becoming so popular. But now it's gotten 1 or 2 million views, something like that.
2 million.
It's been 2 million?
Over, yeah.
Over. I mean, I don't know what to say to that. The testimonials have been insane. Over some people, they don't even discover me through my YouTube channel. It's the Google search engine. If you type novice program, mine's at the top.
Yeah.
So that's separate from my YouTube stuff. And because of that, over the years, I've gotten too many comments saying that it works. And I've also modified it here and there. I've added more onto the FAQ section, and we built it together as a community. I would say after around 2019, the update stopped. So that's how I know it works, because it's based off sound principles and it borrows a lot of concepts from strong lifts and starting strength, and then with my little flair on it. But realistically, they're all going to provide similar results. It's the consistency with the diet that's really going to level things up, and your work capacity.
Yeah. So you never ran it, but okay. So you've done your calisthenics for 4 years or so, about a year of double progression. You mentioned starting strength, etc. Quite strong lifts, very common full body workouts. And I know that from your videos, from your novice program website, you state that the intermediate standard is when you stop the novice program, when you would already reach the benchmark of a 225 by 5 bench, a 315 by 5 squat, and a 405 by 5 deadlift. Now, hang on, why are you laughing, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, finish what you have to say, and then it'll make sense.
Okay. Of course, I agree with all those standards. But I remember you saying something in a video that you plateaued well beyond that. Yes. You plateaued, for example, on the 275 by 5 bench and a 5-plate deadlift. So And I was going to now ask, is that the point where you discovered the Westside barbell system? That was my question.
It is.
Okay.
Actually, my deadlift was around 435 when I switched over to Westside, and the squat was around 385. And the bench was at 275 for 5, but a really ugly bench. Like realistically, I would have told you 265 for 5.
It's
So that's
amazing.
how far I got without it.
It's amazing
But,
you mentioned that.
yeah, but once I switched over, whoa. First of all my joint pain went away because even though I was young, my elbows and shoulders were constantly hurting and my lower back. So the older I get, the less in pain I am. And that's because of what I learned from Louis Simmons with addressing certain weak points, doing high rep band work to strengthen the connective tissue, and just periodizing in such a way where you're always minimizing overuse and developing multiple performance attributes. So once I switched, the gains were explosive. It didn't take me long at all to bench 3 plates. And the deadlift, I mean, I was slacking off on it intentionally. Actually, for a long time, it was upper body only Westside periodization. The lower, I was just maintaining it with pistol squats and whatnot. But once I ended up going hard on that again, I mean, some of the best PRs that I've hit on this channel around 2016, 2017, that was from max effort training and doing volume work on those variations. So Westside, I'll say before I hit Westside, I did the Texas method, which was an extension of a lot of popular novice programs.
Yeah.
And I plateaued very hard on that system. That was probably the worst progress I ever had from a program.
Yeah.
And then I experimented a little bit with linear periodization. To be honest, I did a lot of trash talking back in the day because I probably didn't give it a fair enough shot. I would say that I ran linear for a short duration. It mustn't have been more than 6 months or something like that. And that's when I became frustrated. And people were telling me that there's no point in me trying Westside programming because it's for geared powerlifters, right? But I would see some people that were producing elite numbers raw. And I'm like, how come they're doing it? So I decided to read the book written by Louis Simmons, the Westside Barbell Book of Methods. I read it on the bus coming back from school.
Yeah.
And I was blown away with the information in there. And I'm like, this is not what guys are saying about it online. So I implemented it, and very quickly I was sold. You know, it was like a honeymoon phase. And, you know, the rest is history.
Yeah.
Channel.
Yeah. I mean, that was about, I was just going to say, it took you about 6 years to reach this plateau, right? If I'm not mistaken, from your start.
Yeah, 5, 6, something like that. Again, I'm confused with that 1 year.
Yeah, that's okay. It's interesting, everything you've mentioned. I unfortunately never got to discover Westside only until a couple of years ago. Especially with the passing of Louis Simmons, I'd heard about him. I wish I would have known about him earlier. Funny enough, I also plateaued in my powerlifting days with 275 by 5 on the bench. Just exactly your same numbers.
Look at you.
About 400 and something on the deadlift and about 360 on the squat. It's crazy. Yeah. The numbers are so similar.
These are natural numbers.
That's far with double progression. I mean, it's just the way it is. Your joints, and it was my joints.
Yeah,
I couldn't take it anymore, right? And, so I understand 100%. That's why I'm so interested in now talking about the conjugate system.
Well, look, to me, the biggest benefit is sparing the joints, and developing strength at everything. So what you'll find is that I'm not a power lifter, which is what the system was created for. Although Louis Simmons did work with football players, MMA fighters, and so on, right? I literally took the conjugate system and applied it to my own goals. And that's why when I released my first program called the Alpha Body, you're going to like this one, actually. It was a full body system inspired by Leroy Colbert and Steve Reeves, but with the periodization of Louis Simmons.
Nice.
So I was using conjugate principles with silver era aesthetic philosophies.
Beautiful. I love it. And it's interesting you said that, because Louis Simmons himself is not really the creator of the conjugate system. He stole it from the Russians, basically.
That's right. Soviet era.
And so when you say in many of your videos, the conjugate system is what you make it to be, You're
Hmm.
absolutely right, because that's exactly what Louis Simmons did. And the Russians basically are not even truly the inventors either, because if you go further back, you find a lot of silver era bodybuilders, which you just mentioned, mixing up every, you know, every few weeks, different exercises, which complement each other. You've got Marvin Eder doing floor presses. You've
Yep.
got Charles A. Smith promoting box squats, chain work back in the
Yes, you
40s.
made a video on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing how if and even Louis Simmons says the Westside barbell system is a bit of the original Westside barbell system where the powerlifter Peanuts was and others had started the Westside system barbell club back in the 60s, at 50s and 60s, and he took the name over, but he also started, of course, incorporating some of their stuff along with the Russian stuff and from Olympic weightlifting, and made it into the system that would, I guess, become the Westside system. And it's just interesting to see how far back this actually goes. The idea of conjugate applied to bodybuilding, Olympic weightlifting, or
Hmm.
powerlifting. So, yeah.
Yeah. And then in Louis' later years, he actually wrote a book on conjugate weightlifting. So he brought it back to the
Yeah,
original roots.
absolutely.
So, and actually, I'm one of the first to actually use it in a weighted calisthenics context,
Mm,
because that's one area that hasn't really been fully explored. There's
yeah.
been me, another guy named Mechanimal, who was actually one of my original inspirations when I started off, because he's older than me.
Cool.
So there's a lot of history when we talk about conjugate. That's why none of us are reinventing the wheel.
Nah,
We're just applying it to different exercises and goals.
absolutely.
So mine happened to be a silver era kind of physique. That's always been my, my main thing. Like I've told you many times, Leroy Colbert, may he rest in peace. He changed my life, And after that, I ended up developing the naturally enhanced system, which was again the same conjugate philosophy, but now instead of looking aesthetic with that shape, it was about being barrel, being yoked up, developing the outer extremities of the body. But what I can tell you is that in almost 10 years of doing this now, not once have I deviated from conjugate principles. A lot of stuff has changed. My exercises, my general training philosophies, like I'm a different person, 180, but conjugate's always been there.
Yeah.
At least the major stuff that keeps you, not hurting.
Mm.
Because nobody's maxed out as much as me in the natural community, except for someone who's now on the dark side, which I won't name. And I don't have any pec tears, no strains of any kind. I can max out any day of the week. I can max out when I'm shredded, even going months without it. There's never any problems. And I credit the high rep calisthenics from the start, and then strengthening the tendons and ligaments, everything with all the max effort work and
Yeah.
the higher exercise selection. So there's a lot. I know I'm just rambling at this point, but there's a lot to say here.
Yeah, yeah, nice. It's good. This is great.
Glad to hear.
It's interesting you just mentioned the yoke, and I mean you really brought that to the surface at YouTube, and that's the point now I want to get to. It's also at this point I noticed. So I've been looking, if you haven't realized.
I see you're really going back
Yeah,
to the
I mean
roots.
just basically going chronologically through your whole evolution, right? And I noticed that around the same time, you began producing videos on strengthening and thickening the neck and traps. And I remember this about 6, 7 years ago, where your videos were going viral. Everybody was talking about the
Yeah.
importance in lifting, developing this yoke look. Why was it so important for you to spread this, to firstly apply it, and then to spread this knowledge? And did it really help also in increasing your overall lifts after? That's like one of many questions I've got about this.
That's a very interesting question. So the first thing I'll say, going back to anime, I was obsessed with it, right? And around that time, when I started thinking more about the yoke training, I was watching more anime. I'd gotten back, and I get these little streaks from time to time. What I noticed is that the widest necks, and that was the biggest feature. It wasn't even necessarily the traps, although that does play a role, but the neck. You didn't have to look at a guy's body, just straight up. That tells you the whole story. Yeah, and I remember seeing some wrestlers who
Mhm.
also looked impressive, or some singers who, you would think that they could deadlift 800 pounds or so. And then you would pan the camera down and you see that they're skinny guys.
Mm.
And I always noticed that guys who were yoked looked way bigger than than they were naturally, right?
Mm.
And then with the body fat combined, it would just make their neck even thicker. But then to look leaner, these guys always had a sort of beard that would make them look leaner than me. So what I'm saying is, you would have a guy who didn't even lift, but he had a thick neck with slightly elevated body fat and a really well-groomed beard. And in the face, he looked leaner than me, who had a six-pack, but I had little chin hairs of nothing and a little ugly stash, right? So that got me thinking, the neck can make you look more attractive. It makes you look bigger without even trying. Why not, start training it more intensely? And actually, the first video I made on neck training, I believe, was in 2014, but I'd never trained my neck at the time, at least seriously, because it was a 4-way neck machine at the gym, and I used it a couple of times. And I actually saw this Yoke guy who used to use that thing all the time, and he actually used to do rack pulls as well, which is funny. But all these things started happening around a similar time, and somehow I ended up finding Mike the Machine Bruce on YouTube. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he's been credited to have the strongest neck in the world. He's broken multiple world records. He's done a 300-pound neck extension for 2 reps. In fact, it was so heavy that the chain broke off and he ended up getting a concussion.
What?
And yeah, and he also did a rack pull above the knee with 1,500 pounds. And there's a photo of him doing this.
Wow.
Yeah, so I saw Mike doing this, and I ended up going on his channel and finding all the archives from, I believe, 2011 till, believe it or not, now. But back then it would have been 2015, you could say.
Yeah.
So he had like 4 years of content there, and I devoured everything. I learned from him. And interestingly, my good friend Phil from Fit World Expose, now Statue Fit, we had set up a meeting with Mike. And the interview is still on my channel today. We've done 2 interviews so far, but the first interview, we asked him a lot of questions. And I would say much of my neck training knowledge came from Mike. I was inspired by his physique, by his strength accomplishments. And through learning about him, it made me dive deep into the web, searching for more information, then eventually trying things out myself. Then getting affiliated with Netflix and just getting crazy with this stuff and looking at all the worlds, like who has the thickest necks, who has the best traps, what can we all learn from these people? And what I found is that there were a lot of strongman competitors, Olympic weightlifters, and even some powerlifters here and there. But there were groups, wrestlers, any combat athlete. There were certain groups that they trained their neck in a very specific way. And if you stole their training methods and applied it in a bodybuilding context, then it would work beautifully. And that's what I did, So everything, basically, my story is I'm not self-made. Nobody's self-made. I've learned from those who were greater, who already paved the way. When I discovered neck training, Mike had already been doing it for God knows how many decades, So he's my number one for sure. I developed my own methodologies, and then, people started noticing me, like Omar Isaf, Jeff Nippard, like the whole community was talking about it, like you said. Yeah. And it spiraled to something else, and everyone was on it, and we were just collectively learning, and then the information just got better.
Yeah.
So
continuing on the topic, I mentioned when I asked if it increased your overall lifts after, because I mean, yes, we're talking about the yoke, right? We're talking about the neck, the traps, all which of course protect, you could say, and strengthen the upper spine, right? From where all your nerves innervate the entire body. And I guess if you want to call it, the erector spinae, which transverse down the lower back, could also be then all considered the yoke from the lower back upwards. Would you say that this is vital for developing your overall lifts and strength? Did you find
it's very possible? It might. Well, first of all, 2 years ago when I was shredded, I ended up passing out for the first time in my life, and I was literally standing 100% upright, and I fell backwards onto a piece of marble or something, and I came out with 0 injuries whatsoever.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I think that's because of my neck training.
Of course.
People can think I'm crazy, but to me, that's the reason.
Yeah.
So I'll say that. And then the other thing is, I used to do a lot of rack pulls above the knee with over 1,000 pounds. And that shit was really, really heavy. Like, I know people clown at the range of motion, you know, it's like this much. But the thing is, if you've ever held 1,000 pounds in your hands, it's ripping your traps out of the socket. It hurts so much. The stretch is insane. And that blew them up. I'm going to stand by that statement. And I believe it did something to the nervous system as well, because, you know, although the goal was to never get carryover to deadlifts, it certainly didn't take long for me to pull 6 plates once I started specializing. And, you know, developing the upper back muscle as a whole is never weakness. You can never have too much upper back. And that's the one area in the natural scene where there's way more potential. And I'm still growing years later. And also, I kept all the gains from that yoke training stuff. It doesn't shrink. The only thing that does shrink is your neck. But what I'm saying is, when you overload the traps and the whole upper back and you really punish it for a couple of years with specialization, it's very hard to lose after that point. And that's going to help you on other big compound movements. Like, you know for a fact that that particular area is not going to hold you back muscularly, you know? So now you can focus more on your glutes, your hamstrings. I mean, the spinal erectors as well. I mean, that kind of counts as a yoke, but it's possible to have, you know, a thick upper back, but flat spinal erectors if you're only doing partial reps, you know. But eventually, when I would transition into lower body training, I never had issues up here. And like I said, it's only, they just respond that much better to everything moving forward. Like now, the only thing I do for my upper back and traps, you can say, is the chest expander. And that's worked. It's actually thickened it up even more, comparable to when I was doing those 1,000-pound rack pulls. Now, I don't know what happened there, what kinds of physiological changes occurred, but all I know is that I never get injured in this area. I still got massive traps. And, you know, whenever I try to get stronger at something, I'm never limited by the yoke. So
I think it's personally, my own feeling is, I think it's not just protective. I mean, you mentioned you fell, right? And nothing. It's definitely protective, that's for sure. But because anybody trying to I don't know, whether it's press or pull an extremely heavy weight, as you said, you're straining so much from here, right? That if you don't have, I guess, that muscle there to protect you and to, I guess, help your central nervous system do its job during those excessively difficult 1 rep max, you're just pushing and pushing and pushing the pull of the press, then I find that, for example, myself, when I've ever tried PRs before I did neck training, you pull something, right? Or let's say you don't have a strong enough upper back, that means your scapula is not going to be moving efficiently or working efficiently. You're going to get nerve impingement here, or sorry, shoulder impingements here, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the whole yoke, upper back development is absolutely important in the development of strength, in achieving new PRs, because it acts as a foundation from where to press from where to strong mobility and range of motion of your scapula and shoulder joint and all those other things.
You will learn how to control your scaps, that's for sure. And I would say that for axial loaded motions, that's where it helps to have the yoke. So you can stick to old school training and you'll never be bottlenecked, is what I'm saying. So if you do a certain squat variation that's more upper back, well, it's not your upper back that's going to hold you back. It's actually going to be your quads. So it's great. All the exercises that people consider to be bad for hypertrophy nowadays, well, they're great for you because you got a thick ass yoke. Sorry to swear, but
it's true.
I agree. It does have, and also you asked me before about if it, you know, played a role in strength later on. I think, I mean, I didn't have this, it wasn't my theory back in the day. It was by Dr. Mel Siff, who wrote the book Super Training. And I actually got criticized for referencing this. But his theory, or hypothesis rather, was that if you do a lot of overload training, then you can override the Golgi tendon organ. And that's basically this mechanism that prevents you from hurting yourself. You know, it stops you from producing more force because it knows that the weight is too heavy.
Yeah.
So it just puts a cap on your strength. And he said that if you do a lot of band work in particular, so banded overloads, that can override it and unlock new strength potential. And you won't get hurt because you also build the connective tissue, right? I always believe that to be true when talking about accommodating resistance. And that's also why I think I'm injury free. But I also extended this related to partial reps. I said that doing heavy partials will strengthen the tendons and ligaments.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it doesn't build all the muscles to the same extent as doing the full range of motion exercise. The fact is, you can separate the tendon defects because the tendons just respond to loading.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why I think those heavy rack pulls and all the other stuff I used to do, although it might not have helped my carryover, it did thicken the tendons.
Yeah.
And that eventually would help me get stronger down the line, even though there was no like muscular correlation, you could say.
I actually believe there is a muscular correlation because the tendons allow the muscles to attach to bone. And if you've got thicker tendons, you have greater muscular size capacity or muscular strength capacity, greater contractile capacity to move the bone to which it's attached to. You're basically just building the structure on which the muscle is attached to. So I see that there is a correlation in that regard.
I guess there is. I guess what I mean is that strength is joint angle specific. So you might have the muscular strength in that top end, like strong position, but in the bottom end, you don't.
Exactly.
You know,
exactly.
But you're right that if we're just examining the muscle in isolation, then that would play a role. So I think all that stuff was helpful.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, just to finish this, I guess, topic off, I think the overall development, literally from tailbone to neck, is brutally important. You look at the silver era guys. All right, they were massive up here, and they had thick ass, just to make you feel better, spinal erectors that look like freaking snakes.
Yeah, right? It was always there.
Yeah, so it's
nowadays guys don't have the spinal erectors.
No, that's right.
And you have a wave of people saying not to do bent over rowing movements, and to me, like it's insane because, you know, first of all, when I used to do most of my rows back in the day, it was primarily dumbbell rows and bent over rows, either T-bar or the traditional barbell. And I would do a lot of cheat form to get some momentum in there. And although, you know, it had a worse stimulus to fatigue ratio, the fact is it built the upper back and my spinal erectors got a lot thicker. And you get to a certain point where your spinal erectors are so strong that if you do drop the weight and do the exercise correctly, you're never going to be limited by them. It's actually impossible. So find me a guy who can deadlift 500 pounds and make him do a deficit bent over row with 135, and he will be able to take his upper back to complete momentary muscular failure, done with flawless form. So these guys saying, oh, it reduces motor unit recruitment because you have no stability and you're unnecessarily lowering the spine. Well, it's like, why would you not want to have that additional? And secondly, if your lower back was actually strong, it wouldn't be a problem to handle those deep positions to begin with. So it's a non-issue for those who are actually in this long term.
Yeah, well, that's why you see, again, going back to the old school lifters like Arnold and Franco, who were initially big weightlifters and powerlifters, doing deficit bent over rows on a bench, right?
With back rounding too.
With back rounding with 300 pounds, right? 315 pounds actually, right? And people go, how the hell did they do that? Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So switching, you switched to the conjugate system, right? So about 7 years ago, 6-7 years ago. And did you initially, like I saw your video where you're like blown away after you read it on your trip back home. Did you initially follow it to the T? You know, max effort and dynamic effort.
Yes, for upper body training.
Okay.
I did. And what I quickly realized is that I didn't need the dynamic effort.
Okay.
And the thing is, I was still somewhat influenced by, you know, because even though I had a positive experience with it, at the end of the day, my primary goal was not to be an athlete. And there were people writing articles saying that dynamic effort might not work in the way that you think it will. I believe Mike Teixeira was one of the big names back then saying that. And actually, I ended up learning a lot from Mike through other things, like talking about the RPE chart. But I modified it very fast. But I always held the position that if my goal was to be more explosive, then I would have included it. It's just that at the time, I didn't feel the need to do much speed benching, if you will.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
I just swapped it out. And that's why, the alpha body system was mostly just double progression done in a conjugate style, where you're constantly rotating movements and auto-regulating accordingly. And you have high reps and low reps mixed in.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I feel like that's the major benefit, keeping all the performance elements year round and then minimizing overuse.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I noticed, that you quickly dropped the dynamic effort, and you were basically doing max effort days with bodybuilding hypertrophy workouts.
100%.
For how many years did you use this tweaked method of the conjugate system of your max effort 2 days a week, upper body, lower body, and high volume twice a week, upper body, lower body?
I trained that way up until around December of 2019.
2019, did you say?
Yes. With the volume day, intensity day setup, full body twice a week.
So how many years ago? Sorry, you cut out for a second there.
Yeah, so till December of 2019, I was doing the twice a week full body system. Obviously skipping legs from time to time, but regardless, I did that volume day, intensity day.
So that was about 3 years you did that, more or less.
No, that was from the summer of 2014 till 2019. Oh. So that's 5 years.
Right. My bad.
Yeah. But the goals, like I said, the only thing that changes in this story is the exercise selection. Or if I've been at a heavier body weight versus lighter, because that changes the way I approach things. But in terms of, okay, one day you're going to train purely like a bodybuilder, where there's a lot of volume and many exercises, whatever, right? And the other one is, max effort with, let's say, the 3 sets of 5 right after, like just heavy balls to the wall training. I followed that template till 2019. And then 2020 till maybe last year, you could say, or a year and a half ago, I started combining max effort and volume together as an experiment, because we were told never to do that with Conjugate.
Yeah.
That it had to be 100% separate as to not interfere with the adaptations. But, I tried it out. Actually, I did double max effort days, but I always followed up with volume rep work. So I didn't do 3 sets of 3 anymore, or 3x5 or 5x5 or any of these common modalities. I would just do a simple 3 sets of 10, which would be a back off based off my initial max effort lift, and work on the muscles that contribute to that exercise. So it was basically bodybuilder training with frequent max effort rotations mixed in, which is still Conjugate, but that's how I trained, and it ended up getting me to a 405 bench. That was the final version of the system that I developed, and it was the most effective. When I said, screw the rules, let's try mixing some things, And then, in the last year and a half or so, it's been, you can say, heavy duty inspired, but I'm not really training in that way. It's my own version. But again, there's still some Conjugate elements in there. Yeah,
well, it's quite similar, but we'll get to that. Yeah, so just to get this right, you start off doing Conjugate system to the T. Soon after, you drop dynamic effort, and you're still trying to do a Lewis Simmons style workout, but now you're doing 2 max effort, 2 volume days, but not incorporating volume on max effort, and still going balls to wall using low rep ranges, 3 reps, 5 reps. And you did that for 5 years, and then you switch the last 3 or 4 years from 2020 to doing what I've noticed, your back down sets, like 70% based off your max rep, which is now what you consider your specificity training to improve on the competition lifts that you're trying to improve. Correct?
You nailed it.
Bingo. Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly how it, to the letter, Carlos.
I've been studying you like a microscope.
I can see that, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I think it's fantastic evolution. I mean, you've incorporated so much knowledge from, I mean, we live in a wonderful time, don't we?
Oh, we're blessed.
It's incredible, but this
I wish I
combination.
knew this 10
Yeah,
years ago.
exactly. I mean, I'm freaking 45 this year. I wish I knew this.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Anyway, moving on. So I guess it's almost a superfluous question, but I mean, you kind of already said it, but how important, just to cement the point, do you think are back down sets after 1 rep max training?
You got to do it. It's the most important thing you can do, because the max effort training aspect, which is actually the ability to grind or the ability to strain.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what you do, provided that's a similar plane of motion.
Yeah.
But 1 rep, or let's say you're doing 3 max effort attempts, those are not enough effective reps to induce a hypertrophic response. So you have to do more volume on top of it. Now, it doesn't necessarily need to be a 3x10. That's just to do it. But, and like I said before, up until the end of 2019, I was doing higher percentage back downs. So they might have been 80, 85%.
Yeah.
The 70 was just to get more out of less weight, because what you find is the stronger you get, I mean, you're putting up some poundages that really can do a number on your recovery. Yes. And even with the 70%, that's still going to be like benching over 275.
Yeah, it's taxing.
So imagine if it's not, you're up there in the 300s, and that's an absolute nightmare. Yeah. So this is where the concept of self-limiting variations come into play. That with the percentage back down that's rather submaximal will produce the same hypertrophic outcome, which is what you're looking for, while being easier on the joints. And then the max effort stuff is teaching you how to strain. It's the most specific thing you could do for raising a 1 rep max, but you're not getting hurt on that because you're rotating it constantly, and you're overcoming the law of accommodation as well. So everything is feeding into one another, and then the volume work is going to build better work capacity than doing the low rep stuff. So sets like a 3x10 back down on a squat is not easy. Like you might feel like throwing up, Yeah. So does that answer things?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really good. It's really good system.
Cool.
Do you recommend, though, now moving on to, I guess, accessories after you've done your 1 rep max and your back down sets, still just a standard double progression system for accessories or similar systems?
It's so the last inclusion pertaining to double progression is adding in a dynamic element. So dynamic double progression. And this is where you adjust the sets, like the weight and the RPE, depending how the previous set went. For example, let's say you're supposed to do 3 sets of 10 at 7 RPE. So you have 3 reps left in the tank. And on your first set, you're actually at like 5 RPE. Well, it's like next workout, instead of repeating that, why don't you just up the load on that first set? Then you could do a very minor back down on your second set, or vice versa. It could be the opposite. What I'm saying is you have to look at proximity to failure on each set, because it might not be equal. And if it's not equal, that's affecting fatigue management. So that's the only, I would say the dynamic element is better for strength development, but it won't do anything extra for hypertrophy. It's just a way of waiving the RPE in a systematic fashion. So like the way I would always do ascending RPE. So like an RPE 7 week 1, RPE 8 week 2, and then like a 9 week 3. And then you rotate out that movement for the accessories. So that's just so that you have less fatigue and consistent double progression in a way that's 100% auto-regulated. But it's actually unnecessary. If you just do max effort training, and then a back down set based off that top single, and then just regular double progression, straight up bodybuilder style, you're golden. You don't have to worry about anything else.
Yeah, it's still going.
So, and it's so simple. The only thing that could be complicated with this system is finding out what your weakness is, and having the right exercise variety. Yeah, that's it. But the volume parameters are a joke.
I was just going to ask that. If you basically applied then that to also weak point training, and I think you'd have to be able to recognize what your weak points are to ensure continual progression in your competition lifts.
if you don't identify the wrong weakness, that's how you got guys saying conjugate doesn't work for raw lifters.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's that simple, you know, and that's why the exercises, you know, it's usually going to be extended range of motion or very like stretch based. It's not going to be a lot of partials. Like we spoke earlier about the partials for strengthening the tendons, ligaments, but that's not going to give you the best carryover. So if you want the fastest progress, you got to do things to those competition lifts. And when you deviate from them, it's because you're trying to reduce repetitive joint stresses. So when I do a floor press, and it's a little bit of a partial, but not that much, to be honest, that's so that I can give my pecs a little bit of a break.
We'll get Alex back in a second.
Like a lot of stretch down here.
Yeah.
So everything is about blending, including when we talk about the lower body training, because that could affect your upper stuff. Like if I do a bent over row, that could impact my low bar squat, potentially, depending how heavy I went. So maybe you're going to do more cable rows, you know? Maybe I don't want to do a standing overhead press, of all things, because it's too much axial loading. But it all depends where you're weak at. Maybe your spinal erectors are so strong that this doesn't even matter, you know? So
I lost you right after you mentioned the floor press. I'm assuming you were talking about extended range of motion, doing something like the Fulcrum Push Up, or what is it called?
Yes.
Yeah, Fulcrum Push Ups. Okay.
Yeah, the Fulcrum Push Up. So I didn't even know it was called that. I was just calling it deficit weighted push ups.
Exactly.
You know? And I had no clue that Vince Gironda was already on that, because it
wasn't even him. It was even before him. Reg Park.
Oh yeah.
Goes back.
Yeah.
Remember,
it always goes back. So
it always goes back.
And you know what's weird, Carlos? When I do the exercise, people view me strangely. Like, why are you putting a backpack on to do push-ups when you have a bench press? But it's like, it's not the same. No. You can't get the stretch on your pecs that exercise has to offer. The closest substitute would have to be a camber bar bench with a very aggressive camber, because I have an Nemesis bar by Bells of Steel. And it doesn't stretch your pecs to the same extent as those deficit push-ups. Well, just saying.
It's just the opposite, really. I mean, you firstly, there will always be some kind of a resistance when you are on a bench to the protraction of your scapula, whereas the scapula are free to go full range of motion backwards when there's nothing to resist them.
It's more intuitive, you know?
Yeah.
Like you can, like something I started experimenting with 2 years ago, I think, was no retraction Larson presses.
Oh, wow.
Which is essentially a bench press without leg drive, and your back is 100% flat.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's to facilitate a natural scapulohumeral rhythm and extended range of motion. And I found it to be quite effective for building the pecs, and actually safe, because by design, you're unable to lift as heavy.
Sure.
So it just builds it into itself, you know? So stuff like that. You find movements from time to time where you get a similar training response. Basically, it goes back to stimulus fatigue, right? Comparable stimulus, but it doesn't beat you down. You feel recharged. You feel great. And you blend those in with your normal stuff so that you can continue to train hard year round, or else you're going to burn out. If you're doing overload training every workout, after 3 months, first of all, you won't even last 3 months. You're going to need deloads way before that.
Yeah.
Like, there's a problem if you're forced to take a deload every 3 weeks.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like sometimes I would program that as a preventative strategy, right? But it was never necessary. Like my body didn't have the need to take the deload. But if physiologically your body is screaming, it's like, I need this deload right now, but it hasn't even been a month, you got a problem. You're not managing fatigue correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. You've mentioned that very early on, you figured out that, your method of horizontal push and pull, vertical pull and push, you had established that very early on. As you moved on into the conjugate system, were each of these planes in the push and the pull trained all together in 1 week, or would you alternate them?
So for general training purposes, I would always keep in an equal ratio of all those planes of motion. Yeah. But there were situations where I would only specialize in one plane, and I call that specialization.
Okay.
For example, in 2016, I went a whole year without bench pressing. I just did vertical pressing in a conjugate style. So week 1, I might do a push press. Week 2, overhead press with mini bands. Week 3, overhead press with monster minis. Week 4, a Swiss bar overhead press. Week 5, a high incline, you know? So all in that vertical space, right? And then the secondary press would be like a dumbbell press. Same kind of deal, you know, but never horizontal. So you do that when you want to quickly bring up a lift. That's the only thing you care about.
Yeah.
But in yearly training, you want to have everything in there. Like right now, I'm actually doing more vertical pulling than horizontal. And the reason is I don't really need more thickness, to be honest. Like, I'd rather have more width. So, you know, goals and weak points.
You're going to need a bigger chin-up bar, mate.
Man, it's a good quality bar. You can handle a lot. And I got the super wide grip now, which has also been an absolute game changer.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, man.
Yeah.
Concurrent training. Now you've talked about this a lot, changing movement patterns to protect your joints, etc. Also performing, of course, especially when performing max effort. And you've cycled these over the course of a week, or over the weeks, I should say, such as preached by Louis Simmons. How many exercises then would you generally use for each plane of movement? Would it be 4 or 5? I mean, you know.
Oh, way more than that. So actually, I developed this chart years ago. It was called the special exercise chart.
Nice.
And the way you break it down is the barbell, the plane of motion, and if you're using accommodating resistance or not. And then if there's a dead stop element. Okay. So you can mix and match so many variations that, I mean, I can give you a list, but it would blow your mind. Like,
I'd like to see it.
So, I mean, can I just start naming lifts? So you could do regular floor press with 30 chain, 60 chain, 90 chain, double mini band floor press, double micro mini band floor press, reverse band floor press. Then you go over to a flat bench. You can do pause bench. You can do dead bench, double mini, double monster, double micro, reverse for both of those. You can do one board press, half board press. You can do a low incline bench with all those little variations I mentioned before. You can do a 45-degree incline, same thing. You can do weighted dips, paused with rings. You can also do it with chains suspended off your belt. You can also mix in bands at the same time. Actually, you can do band and chain. So you can do 30 band, 30 chain. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's infinite combinations.
Oh, sorry. One question.
Yeah. And then there's a specialty bar that goes with it as well. So you can be in the same angle, but now you just change your barbell. So you can do a Swiss bar floor press. You can do a flat floor. You can do a flat Swiss bar bench. Then you can add accommodating resistance on that. You know?
Okay. Question then: is there a progression to these different variations then?
Yeah. So usually, if you're going to work up to an overload variation, you have to start with lighter tensions and progressively increase it on a weekly basis. So if you're going to do 90 pounds of chains, you don't just jump into that on week 1. You would do a 3-week wave, max effort, where it's 30 chain, 60 chain, 90 chain. And then you're done for chains. You're done with chains for quite a while. After that, you would do band only stuff or straight weight. Or let's say you're doing double max effort in a week. One of those workouts should be with accommodating resistance, while the other one should be 100% raw.
Man, this is awesome.
Yeah, or like the bars can be the same on a frequent basis, but it still has to be a different variation. Like if I'm doing a Swiss bar bench press flat, and then I'm going to max out again next week with that same bar, the smartest thing to do is a Swiss bar floor press.
Yeah.
This way, it's similar enough, but it's also different enough that it won't mess up your recovery and you'll still get a PR in.
Yeah.
So that's, it's very intuitive. It's kind of common sense as well. And all the little micro examples I gave you with the bands and the chains, like that's just me spewing variations
Yeah,
for the
yeah.
hell of it. But you kind of find out what works for you over time. And you know, if I bring it down to the overhead press, for example, because that's very narrow, I only did close grip overhead press, touch and go and pause. Same thing done off pins with a straight bar. And then I would do 30 and 60 chain. And then the same thing that I just mentioned with a Swiss bar.
Yeah.
But that's it. I didn't do bands or, well, I mean, I did experiment with it, but I didn't find it to be that good, you know? So once you've gone through enough rotations, you find what variations work best for your structure and give you carryover.
All
so
right.
It's going to be more than 5. I would say a maximum of 15 or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, you should write a book about this. I'm not kidding.
I think a new book needs to be in the works, you know, where I show a lot more exercises for sure. Because it's been a while.
Let me see what else.
And sorry if that was confusing, by the way.
No, it's not confusing at all.
Because it's so much to process. I don't want to like throw anybody off with these variations. Like they don't have to complicate to that extent. It can be a lot more simple, you know. It can literally just be a week 1 Swiss bar bench, week 2 floor press, week 3 incline bench, week 4 weighted dip. Like it doesn't have to be all this crazy stuff I'm saying with the bands and chains.
Yeah, no, but it's it speaks volumes of how much I guess the knowledge you've accumulated over the years.
I've tried it all, Carlos.
Yeah,
I've been running the system for so long that it's just, you know.
Yeah, it's evolved. It's evolved to this wonderful thing that I can just imagine what
Thank you.
Fantastic. Now you also recommended in some of your videos a 3-to-1 ratio of squat to deadlifts over the course.
Yeah.
Why is this?
For recovery. That's the only reason.
Okay.
If you can deadlift if you had a 1-to-1 ratio, go for it. Like if it doesn't hurt your recovery. The problem is for a lot of people, doing max effort deadlifts that often is going to mess them up. And for someone like me, again, it goes back to your structure. I discovered very early on that I was not built to pull. And if I did 1-to-1, didn't matter how good my form was, my lower back would start hurting.
Yeah.
And then 2-to-1, it would be like hit or miss. Sometimes it would hurt, sometimes it wouldn't. Whereas 3-to-1, never once had a problem. So I just made it the default. You know, everyone knows that you can do a lot more volume, a lot more frequency, and even heavier loading of back squats, you know, because the deadlift is just, you're starting from the worst possible position, using more muscles, you're lifting heavier. It's a nightmare on recovery. Like it has a great stimulus, but it has the worst fatigue out of any other movement.
Yeah, I agree.
You know, I can't think of anything worse for fatigue. So that's the only reason.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. Seeing that now you're doing quite a lot of volume, or more than before, probably on your max effort days. I mean, the last few years. What is the difference then in volume between your volume days and your max effort days?
They're relatively similar. What I would say is the rep ranges might be different on the accessories. So instead of doing 8 to 12, it might be 15 to 20, you know, but it's not even about that. I'm sorry.
Which day?
So like there's still some blending going on, right? Like, yeah, I'm doing back off sets that will be the same 3 sets of 10 at 70%, but the accessories that come after, the rep ranges might not be the same on both days. So like if I'm doing extensions on day 1, it might be in the 8 to 12 rep range, whereas day 2, it'll be 15 to 20. And that's just to facilitate better recovery. And also, I'm not going to try to blow your mind again, but if you did an overload variation, that affects how heavy you're going to go on the accessories. So if I just did 90 pounds of chain on a bench press, there's not a chance that I'm going to do reps of 5 to 10 on an extension, or that I'm going to do a JM press, because I don't need it. My triceps got overloaded enough. Exactly. So I'm going to do high reps only for that. It's going to be a dual row push down, and I'm going to pick an extension that's very easy on the elbows, maybe even with cables. Yeah. So you can coordinate on the spot depending how your max effort work went. So the only thing that really changed from time to time, if we're talking about presses, was that you scrap out one of the extensions, because the elbow is where you can pick up a lot of overuse.
Yeah.
So your isolations might have slightly less volume, but you can still be in the same percentages.
Okay.
Well, I mean, they could be. It's whatever you want to be, you know.
And this would also be more or less the same for your weak point training, I'm assuming. Would, you know, is in the changing of rep ranges, or would you only focus on weak point training on, for example, on your max effort day?
You always focus on your weak points.
Okay.
But yeah, that doesn't matter if it's, even if you're not doing max effort, you always have to train what you suck at year round. You know, never gravitate towards what you're strong at, because you'll eventually find out after a couple of weeks that by dropping that one thing, you've now regressed, or you maintained longer than you should have. And actually, I figured that out with the chest crusher, of all things. When I removed that exercise, my ability to grind went down. So I'm like, damn, I need at least one set a week minimum.
I was going to ask about that. I'm glad you mentioned that. I've found as well, and many powerlifters that I speak to about the chest crusher specifically, those who hold world records now. I think there's one guy that can do 9 or 10 springs, right?
I don't even. Okay.
It's mad. You should see. I should upload them as shorts, because they're like 30-second videos.
Yeah.
And their records went up because they have to generate so much power from your weakest point in your competition lift, that their ability to press off their chest is just skyrocketed. So have you found the same thing with the chest crusher?
I actually did. And the thing is, I never expected that to be a benefit, because initially people were asking me, does it have carryover to your bench? Is it going to help your bench? I'm like, I don't know. I haven't been using it long enough. But now it's been a year. I can't believe it's been that long, but it's what it is. And I've been using it every single week since then. And I especially find it useful for going to failure, like real failure. Because back then, there were times where I would have said I hit failure, but I probably had one more in me. And the chest crusher made me realize what actual failure is. Like, there's no second guessing.
Yeah.
And you can just push a little bit more. Like, you're inching away. Like, just from here to here, there's a big difference on a chest crusher. Yeah. So if you can get that, then that can help you have that final push on a bench. And I think it's responsible for helping me recover some of my strength so quickly after my cut, because I never lost the ability to grind hard. So just like I mentioned earlier about max effort, it's about teaching you how to strain. That's what the chest crusher does. You're training that element specifically. I wouldn't even say it's about like pushing hard from this bottom position here. It's really just a grindability factor.
Yeah.
And it does so in a way that's going to help the bench and the overhead press.
Are you finding the same thing with the expander then? At the absolute extension position, that it's also helping you with, for example, locking out or grinding that last range of motion?
Yeah, but we'd have to apply that in a pulling context. And it's a bit different because most of the pulls you do is with bent arms, you know? I guess if we're comparing it to machines at the gym, then I could see more value in it. Like if I go do a reverse pec deck, there's basically no straining at the end. Compared to the expander, it's so underwhelming that like I don't find myself having to like really like towards the end, you know? But I would say if you can find a movement that's similar enough, 100%, it would have that effect.
Yeah. On band tension now, seeing that we're talking about expanders.
Yeah.
I also noticed that you preach not using equal band tension to straight weight. Why is that?
Yeah.
200 pounds.
It's too much. It's too much like the geared world, you know, and this is where it goes back to deviating too much away from your raw work. You want the band stuff to be a small addition that doesn't override, because what happens is when you put on that much band tension, it's a very weird strength curve. Like it can be like 200 pounds off your chest and then close to 400 pounds at the top. That scales. I can't explain it, but when you feel it, it's just band tension. Yeah,
it's 400 at the top. You mentioned.
So, and people will doubt these numbers, by the way. Like I used to post myself doing double lights, and I'm like, yeah, it's 150 at the top.
Mhm.
And they're like, but how? If you can't even bench that, how is it what you're claiming it is to be at the top? And it's like when the weight is so light in the bottom, you can really power through it, and it's really like doing a partial rep at the top. So what I'm saying is someone who can bench 315 might be able to quarter press 405. Like
Mhm.
we've all seen guys in the gym who do half reps on squats with tremendous weight, right?
Mhm.
The bands kind of allow you to do that, but in a full range of motion fashion.
Yeah.
So that's the difference, and that's why it still produces effects on the tendons and ligaments.
Mm.
You're still overloading, but it's not done in a partial manner, even though it kind of is a partial from a strength curve perspective, right?
Yeah.
So the bands allow you to push through like very explosively from the bottom, and therefore you can lift heavier weights at the top than you otherwise wouldn't be able to unless it was a partial. And when you put an equal amount of straight weight to band tension, that effect is exacerbated. It's insane. It's just so awkward that I can't even put it into words, Carlos. And it also locks down your form similar to a Smith machine. So you'll find that you're really grooving it in a straight bar, because if you try to deviate forward or back, I mean, that band is going to snap you back. So you
Yeah.
can't even press naturally. So that takes away from the specificity. Like you're learning how to grind, but you're doing it like a geared power lifter.
Yeah.
So that's why you wouldn't do that.
That's very true. That's very true. That's a great point. Now, I mean, I talked to you about it earlier. I'm gonna say it again. I watched your 20-minute video. I've watched it like 3 or 4 times now, at least.
Wow.
Actually, no, I'm lying. More like maybe 5 to 10 times.
What?
Yeah, yeah. Um,
Man.
on all the tweaks that you've done in the conjugate system over the years, and you did this video a year ago or so. In my opinion, it's one of your best videos ever. I think it is your greatest video ever.
Wow. Thanks so
I'm
much,
surprised
Carlos.
that it never got even over 100,000 views. And to be honest, I even commented saying, I would pay to watch this video. It was so freaking good. Um,
Wow.
I love how you tailor the conjugate system to bodybuilding, removing dynamic effort work, concentrating on hypertrophy with the use of accommodating resistance, varying range of motion, including calisthenics, and all really geared to the specificity of competition lifts. And I ask now, um, when was it then? Now, talking about calisthenics, because I noticed that even when you wrote your novice program, you only recommended doing weighted chins. And I even saw a comment that you said, don't do dips,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Now, I mean, having seen your whole evolution and now the fact that you incorporate calisthenics and that you swear by them, um, when was it that you really started to experiment and exploit body weight and weighted calisthenics? 20.
So, weighted calisthenics have always been a part of my training. I never got rid of it. In fact, I believe there's a video from 2014 where you see me doing weighted dips
Okay.
and weighted pull-ups. So I wasn't that strong at them. Like on the dips, I was only doing 2 or 3 plates, and the pull-ups 65 to 70 pounds, but it was still there.
Mm-hmm.
And the conjugate philosophy allowed me to go well beyond that point. But I always view these movements as essential.
Mm-hmm.
Like it wasn't an option to not do these exercises. Now, in the context of novice program, the reason why I didn't include dips is because for a lot of novices, they will experience shoulder or sternum pain.
Okay.
And I didn't want to have that global risk factor being there.
All right.
So everything was to standardize range of motion for one, and to have the lowest risk of injury.
Mm-hmm.
And that's another reason why I put box squats in there, because at least now I know they're squatting to the same depth every time.
Yeah.
Because a lot of novices have issues with that, and it's going to be easier on their knees, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, that could be swapped out, but the fundamentals. And if guys would ask me, can I switch close grip bench for dips? I'd be like, sure, but make sure that you can tolerate those dips.
Yeah. That's true.
But I would say I started like really going hard on weighted calisthenics in terms of maxing out on pull-ups and dips, probably 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And my strength ballooned very fast from that.
I can imagine. It's
Yeah,
such a
like within.
multifunctional, it's a multi-joint movement. I mean, I think it's the greatest upper bodybuilder in the world. I mean,
I agree.
pressing wise,
If you
a lot.
just did dips and pull-ups weighted or with higher reps, you'd have a complete physique for the most part. Like maybe some little refinement here and there, but
Yeah.
I realized you can go very far with those two. And I'm not a minimalist,
Yeah.
but yeah.
That's right. I've also watched again, quoting many of your videos here today, where and you kind of already touched on this, where you're training max effort, 1 rep maxes twice a week for bench press.
Yep.
I'm assuming to increase your bench press to was it to reach the 4 plates that you really wanted?
Yep. I took it from 385 to 405 in 5 months. So that was the most effective program I've ever done in my life. There's nothing that was as good as that. It was rapid progress. It was predictable progress. Wow. I would highly recommend it for anyone who has a flawless lifestyle. If you're sleeping 10 to 12 hours a day, you're eating in a massive surplus, and you have the grit to do double max effort, it's impossible that you won't get super, super, super strong.
Oh man, you're gonna get a lot of people eating and sleeping.
But yeah, but it's hard on the body. Oh, let me tell you.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, hell yeah. That was, and I'm probably going to write a program on that for those who are willing to go down that path.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you then recommend this kind of specialization as well, for example, for squats or overhead? I mean, you mentioned
Oh, yeah.
that you already did it for overhead pressing, if I'm not.
Yeah. So that's what I did again for the squats, but it was easier on the lower body training. And that's probably because my level of advancement was not the same extent as my bench. Mm-hmm. So when I started squatting again, I was only at 425, which is quite embarrassing because benching 405, squatting 425, I mean, it's not normal. But I did that to myself, you know? I didn't want to have massive legs. And I ended up taking it to 507 in not even a year. I got it, I don't remember if the exact month. It might have been July or August of last year, you know? So it was quick. And I did double max effort, same thing, you know? Usually day one would be a safety squat bar raw, and then day two it would either be a low bar or SSB again, but with a compounding resistance.
Okay.
And I only use chains. In fact, I only did 30 chain and 60 chain.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think I did 90 chain one time. So it was very light accommodating resistance, no box squats, SSB, and low bar squats, and then high bar for volume work occasionally. Mm-hmm. Very simplistic training. And then deadlift 1 rep maxes, although those were gone very fast. Within 3 months, I stopped doing even that. Yeah. It became max effort squats only, combined with good mornings to have the posterior chain benefits.
Yeah, good mornings. Gotta love them. Can't get
They're
enough.
The best. And I used to hate good mornings.
Oh man, I do them all the time now. They just freaking bulletproof your back. It's just
they do. Like especially if you're prone to lower back strains, yeah. You got to make it one of your strongest body parts, and that exercise will do it.
Yeah. Moving on to the last couple of questions now. Now, kind of almost to wrap things up. From what I gather, our conversation, you're over 1,000 videos you got. You haven't just experimented with Westside, obviously, but techniques from Matt Wenning and many others. Yeah. Can you briefly explain the most important influences other than Westside that you have implemented over the years?
In what world are we talking about? Because I've done so. The thing is, I've researched so much that, I mean, I don't know how to start with this.
Well, it seems like you're the bookworm these days.
Well, thank you. Well, look, I learned a lot from you.
Okay.
I'll straight up tell you right now, especially pertaining to old school stuff, which were my initial inspirations. You know, obviously I went to the source as well. There's someone right now who has a very bad reputation on YouTube. I learned a lot from him, so I'm not going to mention his name, but I was a fanboy once upon a time, and I was always commenting. That went on till the end of 2015, you can say. So a big part of my journey. Obviously, Matt Wenning, Fitness FAQs, Mechanimal, Johnny Candido from Candido Training HQ.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Omar Isuf,
Yeah.
Vitruvian Physique,
Hmm.
Scott Herman Fitness.
Oh yeah, it's pretty good
You
too.
know, actually, if I go on my
Subscriber.
my playlist, so I interviewed a lot of the guys that I respect, and they were instrumental in my journey. Man, I'll be honest. We should just cut this part out because I don't even know what to tell you anymore. Like Dr. Mike Israel, even though he's enhanced, he's a very smart guy, and he changed the way I look at stimulus to fatigue. Like I always used to say, getting more out of less weight, but I wasn't able to quantify like what it was. You know, I felt it intuitively. I knew, but I wasn't able to formalize it.
Hmm.
You know, Brandon Carter, he's an OG. He's been around since like 2009. I still watch him to this day. Alan Thrall, he taught me how to finally use leg drive on the bench press.
He's awesome too. Fantastic.
Oh, he's amazing. Alec on Curie, we used to have a little bit of a beef back in the day, but now we're good friends. He actually does the conjugate system as well, and his system is very refined. I think he has the best addition yet for athletic performance because he was already focusing on that for most of his training journey. He's in his 30s now, and he added a conjugate flair to it, so it's really good stuff. I would even consider interviewing him.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'm just looking at my subscriber list right now. Izzy Narvaez used to run the Powerlifting to Win channel.
Okay.
I learned a lot from him. Mike DeShear.
Yeah.
Chad Wesley Smith.
Yeah, you've mentioned these.
Yeah. John Meadows, of course.
Of course.
for old school, good bodybuilding information. May you rest in peace. Dave Tate, for sure.
Dave Tate.
You know, all the guys who were associated Westside, you bet I've read all their stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, well, there's just so much nowadays. But
yeah,
all very valuable channels you just mentioned. And thank you
to
me as well. I wasn't expecting.
Eric Bugenhagen.
Oh yeah.
He taught me the power of the mindset.
Yeah, well, he's got some mindset.
Oh, you got to be insane to do what he does, you know? And then, okay, I'll give you one more. Burley Hawk, if we're talking about conjugate training. Okay. He showed me how to further refine it for raw lifting. And I used him as an example.
Fantastic. I mean, that's quite a comprehensive list. So thanks for going through that.
So, you know, I would find these guys who were running the system, you know, trying to confirm my biases, you can say. And they delivered. Brandon Lilly, he created the Cube system, which he also came from Westside. Greg Plitt, if you want to talk about mindset. And then Louis Marco, that's an OG. And Physiques of Greatness, Chris Jones.
Yeah.
Hodge Twins as well. I'll throw them in.
A good laugh too.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Awesome. All right, final question, Alex. You also kind of touched on this, and we already actually talked about this on our previous conversation. But I'm actually going to stream this one first because I think it makes more sense talking about your foundation and then your preparation for your show. More recently, of course, you've started switching to a more advanced, I would say, very similar heavy duty style training, which, as I said, we touched on in our previous talk. Basically, has this taken you 13 years or more or less to kind of realize now that you've honed in your technique so well that you can get the maximum effort, I should say, from 1 or 2 sets?
Yeah. I wish I knew about this sooner because I feel like I could have benefited from this back in 2019.
Okay.
You know, everything works. Even the old versions that I used to prescribe for conjugate programming. Sorry, 1 second.
Yep.
Everything works. The question is what works best? And when should you move on from that current system?
Exactly.
I feel like I could have benefited from high intensity training much sooner because I was, you know, my strength is not that different from where it was a couple of years ago. I've become stronger, obviously. I'm noticeably bigger. I put on 5 pounds of muscle, but I was still eligible. And having done so much max effort work, I mean, the ability to grind was established years ago. So applying that, especially since I mostly do free weights, I've mastered every exercise. That happened, there's no coordination for me to learn anymore. It's done. So to be able to put all that effort 100% in an efficient way, I should have started sooner. But what was your question exactly? I'm sorry.
I mean, you've my question was that it took you 13 years, right? Or more or less, but now you're saying that it took you a little bit less time. So
technically, yeah. I would say right around, okay, let's be nice. Right around the 10-year mark, I would say I was eligible to start training that way. But anyone could start sooner if they want. It's just, is that the best program for you to run in this moment? I can't answer that.
I don't think...
you might as well build your foundation. It's like when guys talk about these optimal exercise, right? And they never even go. It's like, why don't you start, pay your dues first, see how far that takes you. And you might find that you get far enough. And by doing that, you won't have to do all this crazy stuff. Like, this is a very recent thing. I built 95% of my physique, or 90%, let's say that, without introducing heavy duty training principles. So whether or not I needed it, I still got far, right? So it all depends where you're at, I guess. But sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But all this to say, I did notice like a rapid rebound in strength when I started doing the 2 sets method. And what makes my approach different is that I never dropped my volume. I still do the same amount on a weekly basis, just that it's exercises. So back in the day, I would do 2 compound movements. Actually, even when I got my 405 bench, it was max effort. Then I would do a back down, 3 sets of 10. And then I would do overhead press, 3 sets of 10. So you can say it was 12 sets of presses a week, 50-50 bench and overhead press. And then the max effort stuff might have given me an extra 6 effective reps, meaning reps that were like at failure, or close to it. So if I look at the net volume of that, it's not very high at all. It's comparable to what I do now. But the difference is, by subtracting 1 set per movement, I can do more in the same session. So that's the only thing that changed. Instead of, leaving a little bit of reps in the tank and then equating the volume with less movements, I'll just push a little bit harder, drop the amount of sets, but do more exercises. So everything is the same, but the intensity is not.
Yeah, well, you get out of it too. You're getting more out of a workout.
It's a lot more efficient, I'll tell you that. Like, that you could not have gone any further from that session. Like, you gave it your all. Like, you come out pretty dead.
Yeah, you can imagine. So, Alex, that really covers the questions I had for today. And I want to thank you for sharing with me what is essentially your blueprint to mass, right?
Basically, hey, thanks for having me on. It was amazing. And you asked a lot of specific questions. Yeah. So I could tell you did your homework. It means a lot. Some of the things you said, especially pertaining to Conjugate, because, it's something that I'm passionate about and I've spent a lot of time refining. And it's nice to know that it's appreciated by certain people who want that information. So the fact that you watched it so many times and you're able to ask me like questions that no one else has asked me before, like, it really means a lot. So I hope this was informative. Yes. I hope I sounded clear somewhat. There's times where I lose my train of thought and I can stumble a bit, but I hope people learned a lot.
I think they will, man. I think they will. Thank you again. And just to end the video, if you've enjoyed the video, guys, then please give the video a thumbs up. Subscribe to Alpha Destiny. You should if you're not done yet. Alex is truly
very much.
Alex is truly a great example. You're welcome, man, of what can be achieved naturally, given enough perseverance and persistence. So well done, Alex. And that's it from me. It's Golden Era Bookham saying bye for now. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you, Carlos.
Head to www.goldenerabookham.com for the biggest range of classic old school bodybuilding books as ebooks, e-magazines such as Iron Man and Reg Park Journal, high quality bodybuilding posters of the Golden Era stars, merchandise, and classic gymwear featuring Steve Reeves, Marvin Eder, John Grimmick, Reg Park, and many other Golden Era stars. For those wishing to build a classic physique, lose fat, and build muscle, online training is also available. Collectibles such as rare autographed photos from the Golden Era stars are also available, and to collaborate, please get in touch. As a natural bodybuilder, it is imperative to know your own testosterone levels, as they are a reflection of the anabolic environment created by your diet and training. I would highly recommend using the male hormone test kit from Let's Get Checked, and make sure you use my code GOLDEN30 for a 30% discount. Again, the advantage of checking yourself regularly is that you will know how well your body is anabolically primed to put on the much desired muscle you are working for. Not all of us have the time to go to a gym or the opportunity to have a coach to teach us one-on-one, but with the Future Fitness app, it's like having a personal trainer in your living room. From February 11th onwards, you can try the Future Fitness app for only $19 for the first month. Think of what you can accomplish during that first month. So go on and hit my link at tryfuture.co/GEB to get started. Now, if you're interested in learning more about Vince Gironda's approach to bodybuilding, his principles, and all these tips of wisdom that he has, but to be honest, these 3 books, I believe, which I call the Classic Physique Bundle, are the best books that Vince ever came out with. And they, of course, are the Wild Physique, the Master Series, and the Pro Series. Have a look at it this way. The Wild Physique, I believe, is like the ABCs of Vince Gironda's principles to bodybuilding. He teaches you the exercises and his principles, but how do you put them together? Well, the Master Series is a 14-month program of using all of these principles, all of the diets that Vince came out with, all of the exercises. And of course, the Pro Series was a book that he came out with later on, specially targeted for getting into competition. It's just these 3 books, as I call it, the Classic Physique Bundle, Vince's best work, and available, of course, at www.goldenerabookham.com.